in our world, and you see it every time you walk into a plant, right? When we talk about waste in a process, we know that the companies that we go into, 9 out of 10 of them are working the crazy overtime, the long hours. Everybody's working their butts off, especially in their peak season. And we look around and say, we could probably get the same amount done in half the time. You could be working 30 hours a week and be profitable and probably start to scale up from there because people wouldn't be mentally drained and physically exhausted.
What's up, everybody? This is Paul Critchley, president of New England Lean Consulting. Welcome to another episode of the New England Lean Podcast. I'm so excited for our guest this week. He's a personal friend of mine. I've known him for years, Paul Serafino. Paul is the creator and CEO of Accelerated Journey. He coaches managers and executives from all different industries to redefine their professional vision, rediscover their purpose, and build their dream leadership careers. Now, in his 20 years, he's worked in leadership strategy and continuous improvement. He's actually a former lean consultant. Paul's helped hundreds of smart and driven professionals get unstuck and get on a path to having a greater impact, exciting growth, and better balance throughout their lives. And Paul follows a very simple philosophy, and we talk a lot about that in this episode. Transformation doesn't take a long time. It only takes a decision and a commitment to become the very best version of yourself. And that's one of the things I love about Paul, and why honestly, why I hang out with him. He mimics something that Art Burns said in our episode with Art, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago. And it challenges even me, having spent almost my entire career in lean, to think a little bit differently. They've both said similar things about, a lot of times I'll say, well, lean is small ball, and you string a lot of small wins together and you eventually kind of get there. And I draw a lot of parallels to, I've talked about running obstacle course races. So, certainly I can't go out and run one of the big long ones like Bone Frog. We've had Brian Carney, the owner, Navy SEAL, on before. You can't just go out and run 9 or 12 mile OCR. You have to kind of build up to it. So I use a lot of analogies that way. But both Paul and Art come at it from a little bit different perspective. They say, well, throw the BHAG out there, throw the dream out there, challenge everybody, stress the system, and see what happens when people stretch. And as Art put it, and I'll paraphrase, he said, if you, come up with a goal of, let's increase by 5% or 10% every single year, maybe you're going to do that every single year. And a few years down the road, you'll have strung together some really good wins. He goes, but if I go to my team and I say, how do we make this better by 75%, 90%? He goes, we're going to develop new and different ideas. He goes, and maybe we don't make it, maybe we hit 50 or 60%. But after 1 year, look at where you'll be and look at where I'll be. And I've thought a lot about that in the weeks since Art was on. And when I did this interview with Paul, it sort of solidified it in my head. So for me, I'm actually going to, I think, change that up a little bit in the message that I deliver to clients. So I hope it means something to you. And I hope, it makes you think. At least that's ultimately the goal of this whole show. But that's why I called this episode what I did, developing big ideas and balancing leadership power, because you really need both of those things kind of to make this work. And you can call that continuous improvement and respect for people, and I don't think you'd be wrong. So as always, everybody, I appreciate you. Thank you for listening and for tuning in. And as always, I hope you like it, and I hope you get something from it. We'll talk real soon. Have a fantastic week, everybody. All right, welcome to the New England Lean Podcast. As I mentioned in the intro, today we are joined by Paul Serafino, no relation. Hey, Paul, how are you?
Good, Paul. How you doing?
We need more Pauls in the world. So this is our little way of taking over.
Yeah, I was wondering, how many other Pauls have you interviewed so far? Or are we the first duel?
You know what? I think this might be it. Maybe this is a new trend.
Yeah. That'll be cool. I'll send all my friends. I have the first name Paul your way to be on your show, and then you can just keep it rolling for like a month straight.
Right? I might be able to. We have a couple of guys here at the office that are Paul. So
Oh, okay. There you go.
I think I could fill up a month pretty easy.
Nice. Nice.
So you are calling in from Boston?
Yeah, I'm actually based out of Somerville, just over the river, across the river. So, little known fact: Somerville is the eighth most densely populated city in the country. Depending on what the rankings, it's got to have X number of population. So anything over 10,000. So we're pretty densely packed in little zone here across the river from Boston. About I think we're like 4 square miles, so it's not hard to get your population density up when you're that small, but there's like 80,000 people in the city, so it's a lot of people in a dense place. But yeah, we're right across the river and been pretty much in this area now for, oh gosh, Boston area 20 years. Bounced around a couple different places until I settled here.
Nice. So you're fully indoctrinated Red Sox Nation. That's great.
Oh yeah, I mean I'm from Massachusetts, originally born and raised, so I've been a Red Sox patriot, all of it, my whole life, right? And part of the reason why I stayed in this area after college and moving and living in other states, I was like, I kind of something about Boston and New England's home, and so. Of course, asked me that 3 months ago when it was 11 degrees and there's snow on the ground. And it's like, what am I doing? Why do I live here?
I do that too. Sometimes you get up and it's 2 degrees outside and my pellet stove looks like a blast furnace. And you're like, why am I doing this anymore? Like I've fulfilled my life quota of snow and cold weather.
Yeah.
Like I should have gone to Tampa with Tom Brady,
Yeah, he kind of knew something we didn't, I guess, back then. We're all going, Tampa, what? And then you see him on TV and it's palm trees in the background, sunshine,
right?
The ocean. It's like, oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. There are places in the country that are like that in December and January.
Exactly. Yeah. Must be nice.
So you and I know each other pretty darn well. I'd say we've been friends for several years. So, but maybe not everybody knows who you are. And certainly listeners to this podcast are firmly down the lean path and, to somewhat in the leadership arena. So maybe Paul, just hum a few bars about what your history is and what you're up to lately. That'd be awesome.
Cool. Yeah. And thanks for having me on. I appreciate this. And been listening to your show quite a bit lately, just kind of get an idea for the flavor. And I love the flow of it, the conversation, the guests you've had on, and I listen to each person's sort of intro about what they've been doing, what they're up to. And it's funny, there's so much similarity, but then each person's got their own flavor that they bring to this world we call continuous improvement, lean, transformation, whatever words you want to use. Which that's kind of what brought me to where I'm at today, is I learned that, 15 years ago or so in a large company. We were doing a lot of process improvement. That was kind of my role as an engineer. So very kind of engineering, mathy, technical by schooling and by interest. But I started to develop more of an interest in people in terms of what made an individual unique, what makes each person tick. And then when we were doing these large scale improvement efforts and process changes, the dynamics of just how people interacted, from who was leading it to who was doing it and who had the idea and who didn't want to do it, all that stuff I just really paid attention to and started to learn that and study it from not academically, but just from other people who understood it. And what I started to come across were coaches in all different arenas, literally psychologists, psychiatrists, that kind of world, people that were coaches for business, health, marriage counseling kind of things. And the more I talked to those kinds of people to hear about what they do, the more I was like, I think that's what I want to do. And so then, maybe about 6-7 years ago, I really got the bug to start trying to take the coaching aspect into some of the transformations or the process changes we were doing. And even looking at lean and thinking, well, there's this whole kata aspect that's all around coaching I thought was cool. And I learned that. I said, wow, there's so many elements. Let me try to figure out how I can put this together and make myself of any value to people. And I started talking to, different people in industries and in companies about what are your individual needs? Like, what do you specifically want out of all this? What's in it for you from a career standpoint, from a, prosperity standpoint, from a quality of life standpoint? And the answers were, it was amazing when someone gets honest, the answers you start to hear. And so what I saw is I could really help people get what they wanted out of their professional life, but also in their personal life in a way that was balanced together, very in a healthy way, but also a productive way to move them forward. So I just started coaching people individually, one-on-one. And, that's my company was born about 6 years ago, out of that, where I just said, I'm going to do this full-time professionally. I have no idea how to make that work yet, but I'll figure it out. And so, here we are, 2021, and that's what I do. My business is coaching. I coach individuals, but primarily those who are in managerial roles or leadership roles that are trying to make a difference in their company. That's sort of the way I narrow it down a little bit. So I'm not helping people change jobs, and I'm not a health coach. I'm not a life coach. I guess if you have to brand it, it's leadership coach. But really with that specific idea in mind, that it's helping them advance personally through their career first, so that they can become in a position where they can have a greater influence and impact.
Nice. So, and as you mentioned, so you have a technical background. So I can't remember. Do you have a engineering degree?
Yeah, it's a material science and engineering degree.
Okay.
Yeah. So
it
was a long time ago, and I could don't ask me anything technical.
I know, right? It's what is it? C equals E? I forget. But anyway,
there's a bunch of equations. Yeah.
But that's where I love about your career path is you've gone from engineer to leadership coach. And it's very interesting to me that, because lean was sort of the path. So I think along the way, so you mentioned you were doing process improvement at some large company. And I know for at least a period of your career, you were actually a lean consultant, like an outside lean consultant, like what I do. Yep. And then you kind of morph that. So it's really interesting how you moved all the way from the technical side, which, I'll say stereotypically, certainly I don't mean to broad brush anything or anybody, but as engineers, we tend to fit a little bit of a mold in that, we're really good on the technical and the math stuff, not maybe so good on the social stuff. And certainly that's a big part of lean and the respect for people pillar. So I'd like to dive into that a little bit. Are there, in your history, as you morphed over from tools like value stream mapping, Kaizen, and right, all 5S, all that stuff, to paying attention to realizing that it's more about the people, interactions, and communication? Did you have an instance or instances where, I don't know, you're driving home or something and you're like, palm to the forehead, aha moment, where you're like, wait a second, this is more about people than it is tools?
Yeah. So many of those kinds of moments, it'd be hard to go back and say, when were the ones it was really pivotal for me. But when we were, when I was learning about lean, and it was very tool heavy, right? Especially in a technical, high tech kind of environment where we were applying this. I was an engineer. I wasn't at the level of deciding what's our transformation, what's this initiative mean, any of that stuff. I was just doing my job and learning some tools and starting to see how cool it could be. And we were getting big gains, big results. I think where some of those things you're talking about, some of those moments, the aha moment in the car driving home, like, oh, that's why that didn't stick, or, oh, that's what we could do different to really make this take off. A couple of those were people that I'll probably never forget because the impact or the impression they left on me, but they were I don't want to say you're typical, but everybody's got them in their company and they know it's the guy or the gal who they're always grumpy. They never want to do anything different, and they just want to be left alone to do their job. And I was assigned to train a few of those individuals, not because of what they were, who they were, what they were like. It was, well, they're just in your team, and the engineers train the technicians. And so here I was 20 something years old, and these people had more experience in industry than I had years of life. And I had to go in and try to tell them how to do things. And that's where the moments of figuring out, how do I get through to somebody when they clearly know more than I do, but I've still got a job to do. They got a job to do, but we have to find a different way to get this stuff done using some of these new things. How do I do this in a way that they don't just brush me off and ignore me? And it was all about that human to human connection. There's a lot of talk about that when we talk about respect for people. That's in there especially, but it's more than just how do we respect them in a way that they want to participate. To me, it goes a lot deeper. It's how do we respect them in a way that first and foremost, they're going to respect us back, and that we can develop some kind of mutual trust as people, regardless of what we're doing for work that day. And when we connect at that level, it doesn't mean the job becomes fun or social. There's still a job to do and you're getting paid. It just means that you can start to have what people call difficult conversations. They don't become difficult, or they become less difficult. They just become new. They become different, and you start to talk to people about things that they bring up that you don't know anything about. And instead of saying, whoa, this is going to be a conflict or this is difficult, instead you can be curious. You can ask a lot of questions and find out what's going through their head or what's on their mind. And there was one person in particular that I connected that way, where he just had the reputation of everybody's like, watch out for that guy. He'll bite your head off. And he was very abrasive and very difficult to work with, from the standpoint of he just would ignore what you say. He'd walk away. He'd get up from a conversation, leave the room. Just that kind of behavior that most people would by convention would say is rude. But I had to get through to him, and it was a long process. Many of those palm to forehead moments of, I should have asked him this, or maybe I shouldn't have brought that up. And I just was teaching myself as I went. And after about a year of working with him, he was relocating to another facility, and everybody was cheering, hey, he's leaving. We can't wait for this guy to be gone. I got an email from him in his last day saying, can you meet me for coffee? And I was like, okay. And we got coffee in the cafeteria and sat down. I was like, is he going to read me the riot act, or is he going to what's he going to do? And he's just like, I just want to thank you personally for how much you've helped me change over this last year. And I've learned so much from you. And I really felt like we had a great working relationship. And I really appreciate that you went the extra mile. And I was like, oh, and that really, that'll stay with me forever throughout my life. But as a career moment, I thought, interesting how when everybody else kind of labels somebody as something and chooses to just act around them accordingly, the dynamics become very abrasive and there is conflict and things are difficult. But when you look at the person and say, there's more to that person than just their grumpy attitude in the morning or the facade that they might be putting up to be left alone, something's going on. And if you find out what it is and you help them with it, all of a sudden the way you interact and connect and work together is totally different. You start to write the rules as you go together. And so that's what I see as things like trust and team building and respect for people. It's everyone's an individual human first. And if you've got a team of 100, it's really hard to learn all 100. But if you start with one and then you move on to a second, and then they are doing what you taught them through example with the rest of the people, quickly you get that snowball effect and the team comes together. And those are the kinds of moments that I kept experiencing through my career when I left and worked in a small company, when I was more doing a consulting kind of a relationship. And you know how it is, you sit down across the table from a client and there's this understanding of client, supplier, or provider. But I always looked for more than that across the table. There's a person sitting there. What is she thinking? What is he thinking? What am I thinking? What happened to me last night that I'm wearing on my sleeve right now, that's probably coming through in the way I'm negotiating or the way I'm challenging things that I think are wrong. And the more I looked and listened and got curious, the more the sort of barriers or walls came down of conventional ideas of what a relationship is with a client and a provider or a manager and a subordinate, right? I started to see those barriers melt away. And just at the end of the day, everybody's kind of the same, struggling with a lot of the same things. And so I carried that through all the way through consulting. And that's where I started to connect with people at the leadership level and finding out what they really need. And that's why I do what I do now, because a big part of it is just, it's not, coaching isn't teaching. Coaching is being super curious, and it's more learning. And not to sound cliche, right? But it's, if you don't learn about that other person, what makes them tick, all the information, knowledge in the world is not going to change anything.
Yeah, you're right. Because there's this perception, right, that when guys like you or me walk into a room, we're the air quotes expert, which I hate that term,
Yeah.
um, but you're right. I don't want to use absolute language, but I really want to say it never works. Um, so I guess I'll just say that it works very, very rarely, because to your point, we're all humans. And that's why I don't want to get off on a rant, and I promise I'll rein it in. But, people talk about work-life balance, and I'm like, you know what? I'm not buying it. I mean, I know I don't know who coined the term, how it was probably in the 70s, but
Yeah.
there is no work-life balance. It's just life. It's all
Just
it is.
life. Exactly.
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Work is part of it, but I feel like it's a throwback to the, I don't know, Industrial Revolution, how it was in the 50s. I don't know. I haven't researched it enough to speak intelligently, but it's this thought of, well, work is work and home is home. Well, maybe that was true when we all weren't walking around with, these little computers in our pockets where we can get a text or an email or a phone call. And I've had bosses not that long ago when I was working in industry, when I'm leaving for vacation, and I would say, listen, I'm going to work, leave my work phone, at home off, because
Yep.
I need, I'm on vacation with my family. I've had a boss say, well, how do I get in touch with you? I'm like, you don't. You're going to leave me alone for 1 week. If this place is going to implode because Paul Critchley's not here for a week, you got bigger problems.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like,
yeah.
just, and the funny thing is, Paul, even not that we've gone on vacation lately because of COVID, but when we have, I've seen people that there's one, we were at Lake George in New York, and I remember seeing a dad there with their little kids, and we're literally in bumper boats. You know what these things are? It's a bumper car, but it's a little boat in a pool.
Yeah.
He's in a bumper boat on his phone. And I presume it was work related. The look on his face told me it was.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, I feel bad for you right now. Like, what? How? Why?
Right.
It's
terrible.
So anyways, to your point about trust and having those difficult conversations, my boss at the time was a sort of a friend of mine. So when I told him, you're going to leave me alone, he's like, okay. I'm like, listen, you have my personal cell phone number. You can get a hold of me if you really need to, but I'm asking you, please just I have a great bunch of people here who are my, direct reports. I'm sure one of them can help. So lean on them, give them a chance to grow, learn something new. It's a week. If I'm gone for 3 months, all right, then I can understand, but just give me a little bit of space. And to your, but like you mentioned with the whole trust and respect thing, those conversations get a heck of a lot easier if you make that personal connection.
Exactly. And, everything that you said, from what we think about balance to the setting boundaries, right? It all becomes, I don't want to say it becomes easy, because it's like anything. If you've never set boundaries before, you have to learn how. It's a new skill maybe to build, but it becomes much more simple when there is that trust, or when there is that mutual connection, right? And it goes both ways, right? Having a manager that says, or a boss that says, how do I get a hold of you? Well, the same token, that boss doesn't have boundaries about when he or she isn't going to be working. And so their office door is a revolving door, and their phone's always lighting up. And so it kind of, and that's what I mean by everybody's the same and all struggling with the same things. We all have smartphones. We're all connected 24/7. So in organizations where people say, oh, well, leadership's expectation is that we're always on call, or that we on vacation, we take our work with us. It's like, if you just say, well, leadership's expectation is you've kind of dumped the blame off onto somebody else and not owned it for yourself. And that goes both ways for the boss and for the employee. And that's what I run into a lot, especially with the executives I coach, or the supervisors, directors. They don't have the boundaries established in terms of what's acceptable for their life. So it's really difficult for anybody around them to look at for an example of, okay, what can I establish as my own boundaries? And then you just kind of do the blame, right? The finger point. And it's hard. It's hard for people who are in leadership roles and management roles to say, well, I take vacation and don't work because there's pressure on them from somebody else. And it's not always just going up the chain. The pressure on them could be from their team. Well, if you're gone for a week, we're not going to know what to do. We have to be able to reach you. And that's just habitual patterns of behavior that develop in an organization when I think there is a lack of trust, number one, but when there's not that connection with, well, if we interrupt you on your vacation, we know that that's going to ruin the time with your kids. And maybe that for some parents might be the only time of year they get to see their kids based on a situation, right? And if you're the one calling them to take them away from that moment that's so meaningful, you might think twice if you understand it and know it. And just like you said, it's not about work and life being separate and how do we balance, because people play that dangerous equation of time. Well, I worked X number of hours, I need life to have so many hours, and then I got to do this other thing for so many hours. You're the same person in all those scenarios. So it's not about balancing your hours, it's balancing the energy you put into each thing you do. If you worked for 40 hours and you put a lot of energy in, well, that's great. You can put the same amount of energy into a weekend with your family. It doesn't need to be the same logged hours. And that's kind of what I try to teach people about balance, or finding the way that they can start to feel good about what they're doing professionally, knowing it's not taking away from their life or their health or their relationships. Is how much energy are you putting into that 1 hour with your kids you got when you got home? If it was distracted, if you were agitated and angry, and you don't know how to let things go, and you didn't take care of yourself, like going for a walk first, that hour with your kids might be terrible and you're not in it. And then you can't say if you had 2 hours, it would have been better. You've got to look at are you focused, and are you basically dialed into the thing you're doing in the present moment? That goes for work, that goes for taking care of your health, that goes for, relationships, especially with family. And it's hard. That's hard for people to do. And I would never say that it's just an easy recipe or formula, but there's ways to simplify it. And you got to start with, what do I understand about my needs, who I am as a person, who I am as a human, right? What matters to me, and what importance do I assign to all these things? And then the people that I impact with my decisions, what's their view of it? What's their view of the world? What importance do they place on things? There's lots of people I meet that they work 80 hours a week because that's the most important thing to them. And I can't say that that's wrong. It's their choice. But if I'm going to interact with them, I need to understand why that's so important. And they need to understand from my point of view why that might not be the most important thing to me to log 80 hours. Because until we know where each other stands, there's always going to be this rift, or this sort of disconnect, right? And the worst thing you can do is walk in like what you said about expert. I don't like that either, because the worst thing you can do is walk in thinking you know everything already, or that you have all the correct answers. So if I always told my clients, no, 40 hours is the only right answer for a work week, and that's the only premise I operated on, that I'd be in trouble, because I wouldn't be able to connect with them based on what they need or what's important to them.
Right. So I want to dig into the leadership role a little bit more, because a couple of things you said really sparked some thoughts in my head. Because we were chatting before we hopped on how COVID might, or probably will, change a lot of how people do work. I'm hearing from friends and colleagues and clients that, manufacturing notwithstanding, because you kind of have to be there physically, but there's certainly a lot of jobs that might not come back physically. They might just be a remote work from home kind of a thing. But to a large extent, I think one of the reasons why we struggle with this whole work-life balance thing and feeling like there's a delineation is because, and maybe it's changing, I hope it is, but work is how we earn money. And then money is how we pay for all of everything else: house, cars, kids, college, you pick them, right?
Right.
So I feel like there's still a large imbalance of power, because if I'm your boss and I say, Paul, right, I need you, like Office Space style, hey, I'm going to need you to come in on Saturday, right? That'd be
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
You, 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 you have the power to say no, but I also have the power to fire you. So it's like that imbalance is still very real.
Right.
And I really want to talk to you about the leadership role, whether it's for a lean transformation or not.
Mm-hmm.
How do you, when you're coaching leaders, how do you pull on, that cord and your lean background? Do you meld those two things to help them understand that when you say something like, how do I get a hold of you while you're on vacation? What effect that has on people? How do
Mm-hmm.
you navigate that? How do you coach people to seek clarity in that?
Yeah. That's a good question because that scenario is so common, right? That's not just a hypothetical. That's happening all the time, right? Every day, everywhere. And the thing that I encourage when I'm working with a client who wants to know that same thing, well, if an employee just flat out says no, I could fire him or her, but I don't want to because now I've got to hire someone new, and maybe our policy wouldn't allow it anyway. And there's all, but what I say to them is stop right there, because what you're doing is you're getting too granular with case by case. Because if you try to address and solve, and even same with a lean transformation, you know, do the air quotes around
Yeah.
that, right?
Yeah.
You and I share similar thoughts on that. Maybe for another day, but when you get granular, and what I don't like is you got to make the micro, small, rapid improvements. It's like, and then that's it all adds up to something major. You say, well, that's cool, but if you focus first and start with small, rapid, and you start building, you don't know exactly what it's going to add up to. You're sort of leaving it to chance. Same thing with as a leader when you're saying, well, I want to make sure that I can reach my employees on vacation, and so is the worst offender. So how do I solve it with Johnny or Susie never answering their phone when I need them? So, well, you're asking the wrong question. You stopped in your problem solving effort before you identified the problem. What's the real problem? It's not that this particular employee doesn't answer his or her phone. It's, how do you want all the collective behaviors of your team to look? What are you trying to achieve in the end? Even if you've got a dream 3 years from now, and you could have the ideal team functioning the ideal way with the ideal process and the ideal value stream, right? We talk about future state. You got to go big in your mind, with not just big in terms of time down the road, but big in terms of what is it going to look like? And is it going to be different enough and better enough that anyone's going to care? And if you look at transforming your business, your value stream that way, that's where you want to start, right? Dream big. When you look at leading people and bossing an individual, right, being their superior, you can't go case by case, because you're going to address one after another, after another, after another, and it's going to either lead you somewhere you never wanted to be, or worst case, you're going to run real fast in a big circle. And after years of that, you end up right where you started and you didn't make any progression. So instead of case by case, it's look at it as a system. How do you want the system to function? And most people, 90 something percent of leaders, maybe all of them in some struggle to say it from their programming and their, the scripts in their mind, but most want their employees to take vacation and not work, rest, recharge, enjoy their family, enjoy their hobbies, see the world, come back with fun stories and pictures. That's what almost every boss will tell you they want when you catch them, not in the heat of the moment when they're stressed, you know? So if you say, well, if that's your ideal system, right? If that's what you want it to look like, what are the collective behaviors that have to go into that? How does your team have to function? How do you have to function? And that's where you can start to talk about what boundaries do you want to exist between people and around people, to protect them, to protect you, but to protect the team. And when you start to design it that way, and it doesn't take years to figure it out. It's literally a couple of conversations. You can map this stuff out and go, oh, okay, this is how we'd like it to be. So how do we get there? Well, where are you now? Right? Current state, what's the gap? It's the same idea with process improvement, same idea with anything continuous improvement related or lean. When you look at what people call the journey or the initiative, the transformation, what I see so often is people say, well, our current state is we don't do any improvements. So our ideal future state is that we do rapid improvements every day. They're kind of, I think they're missing the boat by a long shot. It's not about individual activities that you're lacking and how do you want to have more of them. It's what do we want this whole thing to look like and function like when it's done and when we're super excited and happy with it. And then roughly how long would we like that to take? For a leader, when do you want your team to be transformed to the point where you don't need to call them when they're on vacation because there's backups in place, there's cross training in place, et cetera, et cetera. All the tools can come into that picture later, but you say, when would you like that to be? If you want it 5 years from now, then you're going to suffer for 4.5 years and then things are going to start to change. You can't fluff it that much and put in that much, extra time just because you don't want to address it. So we get honest. Say, well, if you want to transform your team in 3 months, or if you are a middle manager and you get that pressure from above and you want to transform the way your boss runs the team or the way the CEO listens to ideas or the way the CEO embraces lean, if you want to change that, don't set the goal in your head that once we're doing rapid improvements or once we've solved every little single individual problem, then we can go talk to the CEO and say, hey, see, look, it's working. Because you've gone 1% of the way down the runway and the CEO's going, are we ever going to take liftoff? So you've got to bring to them bigger ideas, more specific visual imagery that you can put in their mind about here's how it could look. And that's it's my version of managing up. I hate that term because you're not managing up. You're basically pulling everybody in to get to the same level of what are we dreaming about? What do we see as possible? And if you're the one that believes it's possible and you can convince others and extend that believability, that's where I think the decision to change comes. Because everyone's like, oh, we want that too. We believe we could have it. So when you're leading a team and you say, well, I want everybody to take a vacation and never be called, and your past behaviors show that you're always calling your team when they're on vacation, no one's going to believe you.
Exactly.
Right. So
exactly.
It's believability.
Sorry to cut you off, but that exact thing happened to me,
yeah, of course.
Well, actually to my team, I had a boss who said those exact words and it sounded, number one, it didn't resonate because it just didn't sound sincere because quite frankly, it wasn't. He would say, I want everybody to take vacation. But to your point, what you just said, his whole persona and everything, he was Mr. 6:37 a.m. to 6:37 p.m. every single day, and would email us all of his direct reports at night, and just so the whole thing. It's and he was the guy who said, "How do I get a hold of you when you're on vacation?" And it's like, you can't say, I want everyone to take vacation and then say, how do I get a hold of you when you're on vacation? Because it's one or the other. It's not both. Like, it's not vacation if I'm talking to you. Now, again,
right.
I understand. I'm an ops guy. My whole life was in manufacturing, so I get it. I've literally had places catch on fire before. And in those cases, you have to make the phone call. I get it.
Sure.
But the flip side is those have to be the 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000, opportunities. The other 99 and 999,
it's my favorite question to ask in that scenario when they're like, well, we call our team, either the leader saying to me, we call our team for emergencies only, or the employee saying we call our leader for emergencies only on Saturday when we know he's at a charity event or taking his wife for their anniversary dinner, or she's on a cruise in the Bahamas. Well, we call anyway because it's an emergency. My favorite question is, how does everybody in this organization or on this team or this department define an emergency? And where's it written down? And everyone's like,
exactly. Yeah.
And you say, well, maybe that's part of when I say design the system, that's part of it. It's looking at it and saying, what constitutes an emergency? You know, and on the flip side, what constitutes us being able to take our foot off the gas? When do we know things are good? By every individual's gut feeling? Well, you're going to have, the super paranoid people that worry about everything all the time, never wanting to let up. And you're going to have those that are like, no big deal. We can take our foot off the gas today. And you're like, really, you're bleeding from the jugular. Your money is flowing out the door like crazy. You don't know why. Why would you let up? So you've got to define both ends of that spectrum. When do we panic? When do we escalate? And or when is it okay for people to start to encourage each other to slow down? Like there's plenty of times in manufacturing where everybody says it's cyclical, right? And if you don't have your level loading in place and you don't understand your pull and your demand well, and you've got those downtimes aren't I don't see those as the time to jump in and let's do our projects. Let's call Paul Critchley back in and do our lean stuff that we promised we would do. And he's been waiting for 3 years. Don't use your downtime for that, because number one, you're not stressing the systems. You're not really seeing what people are capable of and what the organization truly has for capacity to do things. But also that's the time where you should let your foot off the gas. And that's where I think people need to be more cognizant of that from the leadership level and also from the employee team level. Hey, wait a second, things are slow, time's tough. If we all just show up and work real hard, it's not going to change the market. It's not going to change external circumstances. Maybe now's the time that we get to let our foot off the gas, take a break and chill out. And I'm not suggesting, what a lot of companies do, and you see it in manufacturing, unfortunately, they lay people off. They can all the temp employees.
Yep.
That's not the answer, because what is that doing? Stress isn't just hours spent working, right? It's the emotional toll it takes on people when everyone sees half the team's been laid off. They're not slowing down and catching their breath. They're panicking. And now they're at a heightened level of stress. They make worse decisions. They invent problems. They invent work, not because they're bad people, because they're human. And that's what we do in those situations. So instead, you need to look at it and say, if things are slow or when there's a break in the action, that's the time to really respect people's needs to spend time with other things in their life and to have the conversations about how do we do this all the time? Right. Because, in our world, and you see it every time you walk into a plant, right? When we talk about waste in a process, we know that the companies that we go into, 9 out of 10 of them are working the crazy overtime, the long hours. Everybody's working their butts off, especially in their peak season. And we look around and say, we could probably get the same amount done in half the time. You could be working 30 hours a week and be profitable and probably start to scale up from there, because people wouldn't be mentally drained and physically exhausted. But when you have the opportunity to step back and say the work's not coming in or we're a little slow, that's the time to redesign your system with the dream in mind and have conversations and let people, I don't love the offsite because of the way they're used. But if you use them correctly, you can say, let's spend the 5-day work week treating it like an offsite, whether you're remote or in the office. COVID obviously is changing a lot of that dynamic, but let's have a 5-day offsite. But let's have a 5-day. And the great book about this is called Traction. And then the other one's Get a Grip. Same guy, Gino Wickman, I think. You've probably heard of those, but he talks about exactly how to run those events, exactly what to talk about, and exactly how to plan so that you come out of a down cycle ready to kick butt and ready to grow during peak season. Peak season shouldn't be the time that you lose money. It should be the time when there's just cash blowing out the windows and people in the parking lot celebrating, right? Because there's so much of it. And I think we get that backwards a lot of times in a lot of companies.
I 100% agree. And because I've seen it, I get my start in automotive, and it was exactly that. We would get the call from Ford or GM or somebody, and, they're like, well, hey, our dealer inventory hit that level, so we're shutting everything down for 2 weeks. And our plant management, I was in South Carolina at the time. I remember being on the floor that day. All the managers came out and they just grabbed entire departments of people. You guys are all laid off, pull them into the cafeteria, and all right, you're all laid off for 2 weeks. You probably will be coming back, but and then you get the whole corporate speak, we can't guarantee anything. And here's your
Yeah.
package for unemployment and blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this, and you're right. So the people that are left are still maxed out, or, they're still
Yeah.
running overtime and everything else. It's like, and
Yeah.
they don't get a break. Meanwhile, managers, accountants, somebody somewhere is like, all right, well, this is the, in their head, they're like, well, this is the right business decision because business downturn and right, this, that, and the other
Yeah.
thing, our EBITDA needs to be this, our profit margin needs to be that. And that's where I love like what Toyota did in San Antonio in their truck plant when, I forget, it was whenever gas was like $4 a gallon or whatever. And right. So truck sales tanked. They didn't
Mm-hmm.
lay anybody off. They did all the stuff you and I are chatting about. They're like, well, let's get you trained up. Let's get you cross-trained. Let's, all the stuff that we've wanted to do, but
Yeah.
like you and I have both heard as lean consultants, well, we're just too busy right now. It's not the right time. They did all that stuff. So when it comes back, they're
You're
ready.
ready. Exactly.
And you're right. There's so many other places that, I mean, even look at the stock market. If you want to draw a parallel, it's funny. Like I see the pattern, and I'm by no means an adept day trader, but usually a big loss day is followed up by another loss day because it's like, oh my God, people are thinking, it's it's going down, it's time to sell, and then they see it going down and they get worried that they're going to miss out, and it's like that's the time I'm buying. It's like,
yeah, it's scarcity thinking versus abundance thinking, right? It's people panic. Oh my gosh, it went down 2 days in a row. If it goes down 1,000 days in a row and I stay in, I'll lose everything. I'll sell now. And, it happened sorry, I keep shaking my camera all over the place. It happened with COVID, right? A year and a month or so ago in March, where that it was like a shelf. Everything just fell off of it. People just panicked and freaked out. And then a lot of people sold then and just got up. Well, what if it goes down twice as much? Oh my God, I got to hold on. I'm better with something than nothing. And that's scarcity thinking.
Yeah.
The ones, and granted, usually people with more capital or the more savvy ones and the people with a lot of money are like, this is when you buy. But any consumer can do that in the stock market. Anyone can do that in the world. But when it comes to work and those slow times, the scarcity thinking is, well, cut all the costs as possible, get rid of people if we can, not because we're evil and we hate their lives and we want their kids to starve. It's because financially it's the only way we can make it work. And then when things get busy and you inevitably come out of that cycle, then we're too busy to rethink our strategy. And you say, well, how do you want this company to operate on a cycle like this where every 6 months you're laying people off, begging for them to come back, or hiring all new employees who don't know what they're doing? Is that how you want it to run? And nobody ever says yes. Like, of course not. And they look at me or you asking that question, like, what are you an idiot? Like, I don't want my company to run that way. And you say, well, how do you want it to run? And that's where they get all jammed up because they don't know any other way. They think business is cyclical. That's just how it is. It's like, how much truth is there to that? And if you look at companies that are similar, that are successful all year and have tons of profit and are publicly traded, and it's crazy what their stock's doing, you say, do you think they just took the status quo or the conventional wisdom about how things are and said, well, let's fingers crossed that we'll make some money? No, of course not. They decided in their head what they wanted first. And it's hard. I know it's really hard being in a small company at one point, 200 people, 50 or so were temps, maybe more. And we had those cycles. We had those downtimes where it was, the layoffs, and you'd walk down the plant floor and the lights were off to save money. It was just like, it was eerie. It was weird. It was scary. Then you'd go out into the office area and it was just people running around with their hair on fire. Well, what are you doing? Because they were at that heightened stress. They were maxed out. They were just like, scarcity. If the downturn this time lasts longer than last time, we're next. Our jobs are at risk. So we gotta work.
Yeah.
What are you working on? And it was never anything productive. Not that they were just wasting time to make it to look busy. I mean, some people kind of like to do that, but they're doing it all year, even when things are good. But for the most part, people were just kind of running around trying to, finger in the dike kind of situation, right? Just patch any holes they could find, thinking, well, maybe that's why we had a downturn again. And it's hard because when you're in that heightened state of stress and you're panicking, it's really hard to just everybody take a breather. And that's what I'm talking about in those down times. It's everyone just breathe, let's calm down, and let's sit down and figure out what do we all really want. And that's not just for the visionary of the business or the CEO. You don't just pin it on that one person. Yeah, they need to, they're in charge. They need to set the tone, but they need to first get okay with themselves saying, I can take a breather here, I can get calm, and I can talk about what I want. If they do that first and they can get really clear, now they can open that invitation to others to start to do that too, right? And that's part of that conversation of the boundaries, right? If the CEO is the most panicked and freaked out during a downturn,
Yeah.
that's
Right.
everyone else is going to be doing the same, and no one's going to say, hey, let's take a breather and plan our future, because they're afraid to. They don't think it's okay. There's no permission for it. So that kind of stuff does start at the top, and it starts with that individual leader. And it can't just be, well, you're a bad leader because you didn't save your company through the downturn. It's what about you as a person is preventing you from being able to chill the hell out and plan your dream future. Like, what's going on? And it's never, what I find with the people I work with, it's never, well, the business is in trouble. I mean, they say that, but that's, you just peel away the layers, you get curious, and you ask questions, and you find out there's crazy things in their life where they're like, if I lose my job, this is what is at stake, you know. And because everyone's got real stuff in their life, they could lose their house, or they've got medical bills for a family member, something. And that's ticking away back there all day.
Hmm.
And you got to help them through that first, and then say, okay, now let's talk about what you want the company to look like, um, on the upswing or the next downswing.
Yeah. And that's interesting too, because, and I never really thought about it that way, but the example I used a little earlier about the imbalance of power. And, so if you're my boss and you tell me to do something, I kind of, in a way, have to do it, because if I lose my job, then all this other stuff that's dependent on the money that I earn is in jeopardy. And that's, and
Yeah.
as a lean practitioner, you know, just the term lean in and of itself is kind of scary to people. So if I
Yeah.
walk in and I, get a conference room full of people and I tell them I'm a lean guy, it doesn't take 2 seconds before they think, all right, well, lean is trim the fat. And, you start looking around the room to who's going to lose their job. And, the amygdala starts to fire off, and the whole thing just can devolve pretty darn easily. So that's why we've crafted the message to be, well, forget lean. That's just a term. And that's only
Right.
what, 30 years old. This is continuous improvement. It's been around forever, really
Yeah.
forever.
Of
So
course.
what is it about your job that drives you nuts? Or is it always a tool that you need that's never in the right spot? Do you not get the right information? Is the machine always breaking down? Like, tell me about that stuff. And
Hmm.
then, and like you said, you build that trust and respect in the relationship. And then people
Right.
say, all right, well, now I understand what you're up to. And right. And then you can move
Yeah.
forward. And there's umpteen examples I could give you of clients that we've worked with that, we go down that path and their lives are that much better now, because they're not running around with their hair on fire, because they're not doing the silly things
Hmm.
anymore. It's like, Serafino does this, Critchley does that. And we both understand that now. Whereas before, when we hadn't put it on a map up on the conference room wall, neither of us realized what the other needed, wanted, was capable of, all that kind of
Right.
fun stuff. And you're right. I
Right.
think it does start. And that's why I wonder, I'm not going to go on the lean transformation failure thing. I've beat that horse, I think, dead. But I wonder, though, I mean, obviously you need the higher ups, the leaders of the organization, to be on board. And I think what you just said is something I hadn't considered, where it's not just about the support, and it's not just about them driving it, holding people accountable to it, preaching the gospel. It's really about the example that they set, and I
Hmm.
have this conversation with people all the time where I say, listen, I know you've got the goals and the KPIs and the metrics. That stuff will come. I promise you. We
Yeah.
got to do all this other, some of it is the tactical, stop using a buffing wheel on this part, it should be
Sure.
right when it comes in. But a lot of it is, you got to listen to what these people are telling you, because they're telling you, I can't do what you want me to do because
Mhm.
20, these things are all in the way. They may not say it that way, but that's your job as a leader to ask those questions. And it's going to be more than once. It might even be more
Yeah.
than 5 times, but you
Yeah.
gotta, right. You gotta hold that line. You gotta model the behavior.
Yeah. Model the behavior, walk the walk. Another great book, Alan, what's his last name? Alan something, Alan D. I think Walk the Walk was the title. That's a great book. That exactly that. It's role model it. Use one example of the owner of a company walking through the parking lot. Like, I think the press or something was interviewing him about their big launch or something, and he stopped and like scooped up some trash and went way out of his way to throw it away. And it was like, that's just one small example of, walk the walk. And it's not, and I'm not I'm probably going to get, maybe banned from the school or church of lean for saying it, but I'm not a proponent of the leader roll up your sleeves and go work side by side with the frontline people, because I don't think that connects you. First and foremost, a lot of people see right through it if it's not genuine or sincere. If it is sincere and you're really interested, you're excited, what I see happen is now you start to show them, this is how I would do your job. Watch me.
Hmm.
And that is not the right way, because number one, they're better at it than you. The reason they're not doing it the way the standard was set, is more than just they don't like standards or that they're a bad person, right? It's there's something else going on. So the job, like you just said, is really, it's sort of listening to them saying why they can't do it the way they want or the way that is expected, or why they're not doing it at a high enough level. So get curious. Don't make your Gemba walks about, let me tell you how to do the job. It's let Gemba walks, or let just going out to the floor as the leader, let that be you walking the walk as, I care more about what's happening down here than something else right now. However, the reason I'm not a proponent of roll up the sleeves, get down there and show everybody how much you care is because guess what? Your company, most likely at that point, it's like, it's, it makes me think of the ship that got caught in the canal, right?
Hmm.
It's like, you're a ship going down the river, going down the canal, going across the ocean, or you're a car going down the freeway. One driver, typically the CEO, chairwoman, chairperson, whoever it is that's at the helm of that triangle, right? Well, when you drop, step down off the bridge or take your hands off the wheel and roll your sleeves up and go down there and show everyone you can be in the trenches, nobody's driving.
Right.
Right? No, the machine operator and say, "Oh, let me go. I'll play CEO for the day and make the big decisions." So now you're just going to steer off course if you just let your focus go to, let me just do the job with you and show you how I would do it, or be so involved in that I'm not paying attention. I think respect for people, and how do you role model that change is good or transformation and show you care. It's that believability I talked about, but it's this is this is where we're going as an organization, as a business, as a company, or as a team, whatever the case. This is where we're going. This is why, right? Here's some good reasons, but here's how it's going to benefit all of you. An employee in a company, I think the biggest respect that they'll feel is that there's job security, that there's growth opportunity, that there is money coming, that there's potential to earn more, that there's reward and celebration because of collective performance. So if you demonstrate that that's what you believe is possible as the leader, now when you start to talk about what needs to change to get there, then you can make it a two-way conversation. What bothers you about your job? What drives you nuts every day? What don't you have to do the thing differently so we can get to the promised land? But if they don't see where you're trying to take them,
Right.
and or do you say where we're going to double our revenue, and everyone's like, never going to happen. We don't believe you for a second. What's your plan? Well, I don't have one, but let me come roll up my sleeves and figure out the best place for your hand tools. It's disingenuous, it's disconnected. A lot gets lost. So I think first, if you're a leader and you are tasked with this role of transformation, or you've been told by your organization, we need to change, we're going to do the lean thing, or we're going to do Six Sigma or whatever, and you're hearing all these things, you're going to come off as someone resistant to it, or not believing in it, or not supporting it, if you don't echo back to them why it's necessary. Or most times the reason they think it's necessary is because they were told to. They listen to us on a podcast, they read a blog. Hey, everyone's doing it, we should too. So the leader needs to decipher what they're all really asking for and say, yeah, it's cool, we can learn new ways, but why do we want to change? And if your answer is as a leader is, I think we should change because this is what I believe we can do. This is what I believe where we can go. And this is what's going to be in it for all of you. And not false promises of pizza parties for the Kaizen or $100 gift cards for the best safety record department. Like, stop with that stuff. It's more about, are we going to be here at the end of 2020, which is probably what a lot of people were asking a year ago. And if the leader was like, I don't know, I'm working just as hard as you, let me roll up my sleeves and dig in with you, that doesn't inspire confidence.
Yeah.
And certainly doesn't instill any believability. That's why leadership's hard, because not a lot of people know where they want to go. And even if they think of where they'd like to be with some sort of benchmark for an industry of profitability or revenue or beat the competition, market share, all that stuff, in their mind, if they don't believe it's possible, and two, they don't believe they're the person to lead it, then all bets are off. I don't care how many lean tools and transformations and guys like us come in there, teach you everything we know, try to show you the world. If you're the leader of it all and you don't believe those two things, it's not going to matter.
Right.
It's going to fall apart. It's going to come off the rails. And if it's cross your fingers, hopefully we get lucky and we end up where we thought we'd be. You see how that works out for a lot of companies, especially manufacturers, right?
Right.
They're not doing so hot. And so you've got to believe it. And if you're the leader of it, start there, come up with your dream, outline your vision in a way that's actually going to inspire people, not poster on the wall material, but real conversations you can have with frontline operators, middle managers, directors, customers, even suppliers, right? If they get so excited about your vision that they start to think it's their own idea because they believe it so much, the chance of success is greater because they're going to want to build it, because now they're like, I want that too. And it is a tough task, but if you are a leader, if you volunteered to be the leader, if you worked your way up, you stepped forward, you said, I'm the guy, I'm the gal, then that's part of the job. And it's not easy, but there are ways to learn that. And there's strategies to do it. And you've got to start there. That's kind of what I believe. And I know I was a little bit of a tangent there, but
that's okay.
Kind of on the theme of leadership and how does the interaction work and respect for people. I think that's kind of how I see it all tie together.
No, I'm right there with you, Paul. I mean, we talk a lot on this podcast and we do with clients. It's all, it all comes back to all the stuff that we've kind of been chatting about. But I do like to take a little. So that was a lot of heavy conversation. So let's lighten it up a little. I like
apologize to the people listening for
it's
going
the
deep on afternoon here, but
it's the content everyone's here for. Cool. Well, that and the wicked fun part.
Yeah.
You up for this little game?
Let's do it. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So I mixed it up for you just because. So I've got some would you rather questions.
Oh.
All right. Would you rather have more time or more money?
Interesting. I would rather have more time. Reason being, because the more time you have, I think the more money you can get. Figure out ways.
There you go.
Yeah.
Would you rather have a rewind button or a pause button for your life?
Pause. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if I need to explain that, but I'm a no regrets kind of person.
But you don't have to. It's
made a lot of mistakes, a lot of bad decisions, but I don't regret any of it because it got me to where I am and made me who I am. And those two things are good enough. So hit pause would be just give me a chance to reflect and regroup.
There you go. That's a good answer. I like that one.
Cool.
Would you rather be stuck on a broken ski lift or in a broken elevator?
Ooh, man. Wow. You know what? I'm going to go with elevator because I wouldn't be able to see other than the floor number being lit up. Potentially, I wouldn't know how high I am, but on a ski lift, I don't like heights when you're not moving. Put me on a roller coaster. That's cool. Ferris wheel. No.
Really? I'm the opposite.
Really?
I've been on one roller coaster my entire life. I will never, ever go on another one.
Oh no. Somewhere in New England, somewhere I would know, you think? Or
No, it was in New
uh
York. I was the girl I was dating in college at the time.
okay.
I don't, it was in, I don't know, it was in New York State somewhere, but I remember it was called the Mind Eraser.
Oof.
And it just, yeah, it scarred me for life. Uh,
Fair enough.
would you rather hear the good news or the bad news first?
Good news first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Would you rather have the ability to see 10 minutes into the future or 100 years into the future?
100 years. Yeah. Way more exciting. I can tell you what's going to happen in 10 minutes from now
Yeah,
with
that's true.
pretty high confidence. But then again, things change on a dime too. So
Yeah, good.
maybe I'll think about that one more. But my gut reaction is 100 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Last one. Would you rather be in a zombie apocalypse or a robot apocalypse?
Zombie.
For real?
Yeah, I've watched all the I know how to survive. I've watched Walking Dead beginning to end. I know exactly what to do.
Right?
Swords. Swords are the answer.
That's right? Because the whole, right, you run out of bullets eventually.
Run out of bullets, guns make noise, it attracts more zombies.
There you go.
So there's my survival strategy for the zombie apocalypse.
There you go. And I don't know how many Terminator movies there have been, so it doesn't feel like that's a right sustainable. If that happens, I don't know
30?
if it's a sustainable solution.
Yeah, that gets a little too. Yeah, zombies are more believable than robots.
Yeah, we're gonna end up like in the Matrix, anyways. We're not even our societal consciousness is just gonna fade away. We're not even gonna know the difference. Yeah, like you and I might not. We might be in jelly pods right now. Who even knows?
Right, we wouldn't know. Here. Exactly. Yeah, good point.
All right, so Paul, we got a few minutes left. I always like to just throw it out to the guest and say if there's anything that maybe we didn't chat about. I mean, I know you and I covered a ton of ground, but are there any last things that you like to share, things you want people to think about?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you asked because I do have kind of one thing, and it applies to, I think, with lean and continuous improvement and all these things we talk about with change, right? And transformation. It's kind of a buzzword these days, but it's been around forever. And people talk about personal transformation, organizational transformation, value stream transformation, right? It's all about going from where you might be stuck to some place you want to be. And what I firmly believe and what I base a lot of my coaching around is that transformation doesn't have to take a long time. Even of a company, it doesn't take years. All it takes is decision and commitment, a decision that you really want it, and then committing to whatever the vision or the dream is. Everything else after that is logistics. So transformation to me happens in an instant, happens in your mind. And you'll know it. And if you look back in your own life, if you're listening to this, you think about things you've done personally, professionally, whatever the case may be, you've changed, you've evolved. Most likely, unless you're 3 or 4 minutes old. Think about the changes that were intentional, right? And it might have been a lot of work. It might have taken a long time, but you can trace all of it back to a decision that you made, a defiant commitment that you want what you want it yesterday, and you're going to do something about it. And I firmly believe that to be true. I kind of live my life by that. I look back at examples where I changed unintentionally or unknowingly and realized it was back to decisions that I made, whether they were favorable or productive, or maybe they were destructive. And I just didn't realize it because it was under pressure, but all of it starts with that. And so when it comes to lean, if you're looking to start to apply any of the things you've learned about lean, if you're new to it, or if you've only been practicing for a year, or even if you're a seasoned professional doing this stuff 30, 40 years, and you can recite the book, whichever book you happen to believe is the book, even if you're that good, something you may want to look at is, what is your scale of time based on? When you say we can get to X, we're at X, we can get to Y. And everybody always gives a timeline. This in the grant writing world, it's pretty rigid, but a lot of things I've seen, it's a 12 or 24 month. What is it based on? And a lot of times when you dig deep and you start to figure it out, it's really just, it's arbitrary. It's, a moving target in a lot of cases. but why that number? And could it be sooner? And not that speed's the name of the game, but another nugget to share is I don't like to call it the lean journey. And even, with my process and how I've evolved, where I've come, I'm not on a lean journey. I don't subscribe to life's a journey, not a destination. I think life is full of infinite destinations. You pick the ones that you want, decide why you want them, and then getting to each one's its own journey. And the more you do, the more you'll get to see. And I think the more you'll grow as a person and just even as society, if we wanted to go almost meta with some of this stuff. And I know it's getting deep again at the end here, but honestly, if you think about it, all the things that you want to try and do and see and who you want to be, the more cycles of that you go through, if you call each one a journey, I think the further you can go and the more you can grow. Because if you look at it as one single journey to the end, it's a lot of people just kind of wandering and meandering the path, kind of lost.
Yeah.
And when it comes to lean in your company and your team, that's no way to inspire anybody, and it's also not going to get you anywhere anytime soon. So speed's not the name of the game. It's quantity. How many new destinations can we reach?
Yeah.
How many transformations does that mean we need to go through? And if we want to do them all in 10 years and we got 10 things to do each one, let's plan on a year for each. And if you want to do 10 in a year, we got about a month. And I think it can be that arbitrary, but I think at the same time, free yourself of believing it takes a long time and just ask yourself the question, could we get there tomorrow? And if the answer is yes, then get to work, even if you got to stay up all night, but you'll be there tomorrow. You'll know what it's like instead of waiting a year.
Right. And that's my knock on the whole lean transformation and the failure rate that people, make up, quite frankly, because, and I know you and I agree, so I won't preach to the choir, but I think people tend to think that it's a failure because they think they're thinking way too big. To your point, well, this is going to be an 8-year or 10-year plan.
Yeah.
And it's like, call it back to, New Year's resolutions. By Valentine's Day, I think the statistic is 80% have failed.
Yeah.
Yet those same people will make a New Year's resolution next year too. And it's like,
right.
Stop doing that. It's a bunch, like you said, it's a bunch of little destinations, a bunch of little PDCA cycles. Just do that,
basically.
and then a little bit, and then do a little bit, and then do a little bit. And then, like you said, you string them all together. Right.
And not even a little bit, go big each time, a little bit. I think the micro, kind of touching on what I said earlier about the rapid improvement and the small micro improvements add up. And I think that's risky because you don't know what it's going to add up to unless you intentionally decided that and then worked backwards. Use the micro or the small rapid for time. We're going to do an improvement every week. And then, but have the scale and scope of that improvement, the dream of where you want to be, as big as you possibly can think. Because what we're capable of as people, as teams, and as companies is far greater than anything that we've been convinced of to this point. We're just getting in our own ways. So if we say we want to double our bottom line and our timeline is a week, and you get people believing that is possible and throughout your company, you get a lot of people signing up to do it, and a lot of things are going to change. Now, if you fall short, if you don't double your profitability, if your profitability in a week is exactly the same, most likely it will be, right? But I wouldn't call it a failure. I wouldn't add it to the weird made up stats out there about 97.2% of them, whatever, garbage, right? I wouldn't count it towards that. I would say you were 100% successful on the decision and the commitment to it. That's all that mattered, because you're going to look really different in a week. It's a workout meme I saw somewhere, Instagram or Facebook. One of my friends shared was, start today, because a year from now, you're going to wish you had.
I've seen that one. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's that simple, right? It's, oh my God, I got to learn this technique, these exercises. I got to buy this gear. I need a gym member. All these things that we talk ourselves out of taking any action. And the longer of a time frame you give yourself, the less you act. Because, I can do it next month. We can start next quarter. We can just, chalk the first 6 of the months of the year up to whatever. And now we're going to get serious. And you keep moving the goalposts. Give yourself a week to get in shape. Give yourself a week to drop 10 pounds. You're going to make some drastic changes. Now, advise talking to an expert, make sure, you're doing it in a healthy way.
Yeah,
right.
right. A disclaimer, Paul Serafino is not an MD. So
Yes.
you got to throw that one out there.
Right. However, if you read, David Goggins, you read his book, he dropped from 270 or 260 pounds. He wanted to join the Marine Corps, and he got down to, I think he dropped like 80 pounds in create like 90 days or something.
Wow.
And I'm probably got the numbers wrong, but read his book, Can't Hurt Me. And he talks about exactly what he did. I mean, he did it, and he's a human being like everybody else. He had no other advantage. He was dirt poor, spraying for cockroaches to make money, and transformed his life because he decided what I have isn't what I want. And the next thing I want, there's a deadline, which is humanly impossible. And he made it. We're all capable of that. Do it in a safe way, do the things that are important first, but don't let arbitrary timelines be the deciding factor in doing nothing.
And that's a valid point. I'm going to have to think about it after, and I hope everybody listening will too. I'm sure they will. Because you're right. That's, part of the lean mantra is always, set the BHAG and, work towards it. And if you hit it, great. If you didn't, hey, at least you came close. But maybe that's, maybe we can supplement that with kind of what you've talked about, which is what if? Just ask that question, right? What if? All right. So we want to double our sales, and just put it there. We want to double our sales. Well, how long do you think it'll take? 10 years. How do we do it tomorrow? How do we do it 3 months from now? And I do wonder if that will open up a bunch of new ideas on maybe something that you never even considered before.
Right. It'll start to encourage new possibilities, right? Possibility thinking, and in a technique for anyone that's listening that thinks this might be kind of a cool idea or doesn't think I'm full of it, then look at deadlines or goals, right? Not deadlines, goals that you have with timelines for your transformation, whatever it is, your health, your relationships, your company, your team, your lean stuff. What's the date that everybody's shooting for? And if there isn't one, start there, right? Come up with one. But if you got one, like you just said, double our sales, well, 10 years, that number kind of came out of nowhere, but it also came through a lot of people's filters and conventional wisdom about what they think and what they believe based on what they've seen, right? But if we always operated based on how the past was, we wouldn't have gotten anywhere. We'd be kind of walking around living in caves sort of thing. So you say, okay, well, if it's 10 years and that's unanimous, that's the answer. Everyone kind of goes, yeah, okay. And they clap and they write it on the whiteboard. The challenge, or the strategy I use, is cut it in half immediately. And if you can't prove that it's impossible to do it in 5 years, cut it in half again. Keep going until you basically can all agree, well, that's either close to impossible or it's going to kill us to try. It's not worth it. The gain doesn't outweigh the risk or the potential loss. So you can cut a 10-year goal into a year. You can cut it to 6 months. When I coach leaders and we talk about moving up in their career, earning more, getting to be, VP from senior manager, and they say it's 3 levels and traditionally it takes 8 years and blah, 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 blah. I've watched it happen, 2 promotions in a year for somebody who was told on her like 3rd month in the company, you don't have what it takes to make it in this business. A year later, she was 2 levels higher. She was winning awards. She was getting her budget was growing when everybody else was losing theirs because they didn't manage it right. So it's possible, but the challenge or the goals she had was, 5 to 10 years. Everybody always says my 3 to 5 year plan, my 5 to 10 year plan is get to this level, move out to California, change company, blah, blah, blah. In less than a year, she was already blowing that out of the water. It's possible, but you have to start with challenging that. First, do you believe you can get there? Do you believe you're the one that can do it? And then next, challenge your timeline. Assume it was arbitrary. Even if it's customers, when they give you the deadlines of when they want things, always challenge your team. Can we do it sooner? What do we stand to gain if we do? If we lose by doing it sooner, don't do it sooner. If we gain more business, we gain more trust, we gain a better relationship, whatever the case may be, then do it sooner. Just because a customer wants it in a year, if you could do it in 6 months, is that better for you?
Right. They'll take it, I'm sure, right? I've yet to meet a customer that
most likely.
Right. If you say, well, yeah, true. Maybe not.
Not always, but but most do. Yeah.
Yeah, but a lot would, I mean,
Yeah.
that's like an ISO. We always ask the question when they, because one of the quality metrics is usually on time delivery. And one of the questions we always ask is, well, is that to promise date or to customer request date? Because
Right.
it's usually never the same date, because a
Right.
lot of times customers be like, well, if you have it right now, I'll take it right now.
I'll take it now.
You know,
I'll pay you more for it today. Okay, let's get it
bingo,
today. Yeah.
bingo. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of possibility and opportunity opens when you challenge just that one thing, that timeline. It's pretty powerful.
Well, Paul, always a pleasure. We could be here all day, and
I know
I'll have
this
to
was
have you come
awesome.
back
Thank you.
because I want to, we got to delve into some of this other stuff. But
Absolutely.
so real quick though, if people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way or a couple best ways to find you?
Yeah. Best way, number one, LinkedIn. I think I'm P Serafino, might have a 7 on the end. I forget, but if you're friends with Paul or when we post this, you'll be able to find me there, but Paul Serafino on LinkedIn. And the other way is paulserafino.com. Just go to my website. You'll be able to read a little bit about what I'm up to, some more of the philosophy that we talked about today, and some ways to connect with me there as well.
Awesome. All right, my man, I'll let you go. Thanks again, Paul. It was good to see you.
Yeah, you too, Paul. Thanks for having me on today. A lot of fun.
Man. Take it easy.
You too.
Hey, everybody, it's Paul. Before I let you go, I just wanted to say thanks again for listening. You've really made doing this podcast a very rewarding experience for me. I get a lot of messages from listeners, and everyone has something nice to say, which I very much appreciate. Of course, I'm always open to feedback on ways we can make it better. I mean, that's Kaizen after all. And by no stretch do I claim to have got this all figured out. So if there's things that I could do better, please, by all means, feel free to reach out and let me know. And likewise, if there's somebody that you think would be a great guest, also let me know. There's a chance I don't know who those folks are. So somebody that you can help put us in touch with, somebody you want to learn more about, certainly let me know and I'll reach out to those folks. But I hope you find the podcast fun and entertaining, educational, and maybe even a little inspirational, I hope. That's really what I'm going after with this whole thing. So thanks again. And one small ask, if you don't mind, if you listen, whatever your preferred platform is, if you could just, subscribe, give us 5 stars on Apple or whatever, again, whatever platform you listen to, it helps. The algorithms like it. So if you could do that for me, I would greatly appreciate it. And we'll talk to you real soon. Thanks, everybody.